As was mentioned, I'm Shauna Morgan, and I'm the Director of Development for WIDS. What that really means is that I raise money to keep the organization going. I'm responsible for all fundraising. And I came to WIDS less than a year ago. It's been a wonderful organization to join, and I'm just proud to be here, and I'm proud to be at this event. I wanted to talk just briefly about my background and why this panel came together and is important. So I had a very long career in the tech and financial services space. I was responsible for running large teams and working with clients to sell our solutions. We talked about sales earlier, and make sure that the solutions that we were bringing to market that included data science, AI, machine learning, and all that's involved could be actively deployed in software solutions and solve real business problems, right? So really, really great role that I had. I loved it tremendously. And through that experience, my job was to negotiate the largest deals around the world with top Fortune 500 companies. So you would think with that experience, right, I'm fundraising for WIDS, I have this, long 30+ year experience selling, that I would do a great job negotiating for myself. But I actually negotiated for my employees, I negotiated for my clients, I negotiated for the companies I work for, and I really struggled to negotiate for myself. I also really knew where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, and the process to get there, to get to a leadership position, was long, cumbersome, and not exactly what I had in mind. And eventually I did get there. But what I think is important is as I talk to this community around the world, what I think is important is that we learn from each other, that those of us that have been in the industry for a long time can share our experience and help you work on how to get the new job, how to move to the next one, how to work on promotions, and how to make sure you're fairly compensated. So with that, we brought together a great panel of industry experts, and I'd like to give you a little bit about their backgrounds. So first is Tristan Orford on my left here. Tristan is Vice President of Total Rewards and M&A at SentinelOne. He's a seasoned executive that's currently leading compensation and benefits. He joined the company in 2022 and leads the teams responsible for all aspects of compensation, including sales, executive, and equity, as well as employee benefits. Prior to SentinelOne, he led executive and broad-based compensation at Electronic Arts, and prior to that, he led the global compensation team at Riot Games, building programs and practices during a period of substantial business and headcount growth for the company. Next, we have Laura Kuehl. Laura Kuehl. Laura is a senior executive with over 30 years of experience in the telecommunications and financial services and banking industries. She spent 26 years at T-Mobile, where for the past 19 years, she has focused deeply on credit risk management. Laura currently leads the strategic oversight and delivery of fraud, credit, and collections decision engines capabilities across the customer lifecycle, helping the businesses make smarter, faster decisions through powerful platform solutions. I think I used to sell to Laura, say those things, and now I'm tripping up on it. Awesome. All right, next we have Lucas Petto. Lucas is a compensation business partner at Google, acting as an internal consultant for teams such as YouTube devices and services, aka Pixel and Android. I didn't quite understand that before I read your bio. And working with the R&D teams. Much of his time is spent on managing effective communication and compensation strategies at a scale to retain the most critical and at-risk talent at Google, while balancing fairness and pay equity. Prior to his time at Google, he worked in various compensation roles at Electronic Arts, Redfin, Microsoft, where he helped scale and optimize programs that brought rigor and governance to compensation management. And last but not least, Ella Hale. Ella currently leads the executive compensation at Visa, bringing deep expertise in designing and implementing executive compensation programs at companies like Electronic Arts, Microsoft, and WTW. Throughout her 18-year career focused on executive compensation, she has developed and scaled executive pay programs that enhance leadership development, align with business strategy, and meet shareholder expectations. She focuses on translating complex data into clear and actionable insights, facilitating informed decision-making at the highest levels. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. All right, so I'm just going to stand so I can look at the panelists and give them more room on the stage. So each of you brings a unique perspective, and you've had a unique journey getting here. From championing equity and career growth across industries to shaping strategy at the highest levels in your organization, right? Very senior, this team. So to get the conversation going, the first question I have for you is, would you like to share a little bit about your journey? And are you in the career that you thought you'd be at this point? So who should we have go first? Do I need to pick?
I'll go first.
Okay.
So to answer the question, am I in the role that I thought I would be in? Absolutely not. I started out as a customer service rep back in the day for a former telco, not T-Mobile. And then I transitioned to T-Mobile and have spent the last 26 years here. And I have to say that the journey has been rewarding. There have been challenges. There are lulls, ups and downs, peaks and valleys. And I have to say I'm in the right place where I'm at right now today. I feel the most complete and feel comfortable with where I'm at in my journey. And I think it's because of the experience that I've had over the past 30 years. And it's being curious, it's being ambitious, it's asking a lot of questions and learning along the way. And it's also part of it is being responsible and taking ownership of my own career path, which I think is really, really important. I think as we have this discussion around compensation or promotions and careers, a lot of it is dependent on yourself and what you're driving. So I think it's been an extraordinary ride so far. I hope and think that I have a little bit longer to go. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Who would like to jump in? Tristan?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, similarly, not necessarily where I didn't know that my current job existed probably when I was in college or earlier. So didn't really have a concept of that. But similar to what Laura mentioned, I think have found a lot of meaning and enjoyment in my career. And part of that has been helped by having, at various crucial moments, a structured way to go about thinking about career options, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to get out of various jobs, because we'll talk a lot about structures and how different, there's different jobs. You can also get different things out of different jobs depending on what you go into it wanting to emphasize. So I've been very fortunate to be able to have those experiences and make the most of them, at least in some key ways along the way.
How about you, Ella?
I actually grew up thinking that I would become an exec comp professional. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know anybody who thought that in my network. But yeah, I'm very similar. I kind of stumbled into my job. It had nothing to do with what I majored in college. And my 20s, I kept pondering, is this the right industry? Is this the right job for me? I went back to school for my master's in public policy, but didn't make that career change. I ended up staying and then took a career break, and the opportunity to bring me back to workforce career break after my second child. And the opportunity that brought me back to the workforce was in executive compensation. So I felt like executive compensation kept pulling me back to where it is. And I developed the appreciation over time, like in the meaning of, the meaning and criticality of this role at companies. And so I was very comfortable being an IC for the longest time. And, some of you may, relate to this, but for me, breaking into management track, leadership, it's kind of newish. It's been only like 4 years or so. So I'm kind of newer on that side. But what prompted me was during COVID, when this whole Asian hate crime was getting out of control. I really thought about representation at all levels, but especially at the leadership level. And I really couldn't find female Asian leaders in my space. And so I decided, okay, well, I want to be the change that I want to see. And so that kind of prompted me to find opportunities where I could be, where I am now. And so it became more intentional as I grew into my career. But yeah, I didn't start thinking that I will be here.
Great. Lucas?
Yeah, very similarly. On.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So very similarly, sorry. No, I didn't think I would be in compensation. Didn't know this job existed. But I was very lucky to fall into it through a connection. So a connection that I had at a college job kind of introduced me to the world of HR, and it had slowly evolved into the role that I'm in now. I was lucky enough to be in a company where they offered a rotational program. I was able to try different roles and try different things, which really allowed me to have time for some self-reflection, really trying to understand, like, what is it that I enjoy doing during the day? What is it that I don't enjoy during the day? And then really continuing to lean on connections that I had to get an understanding of what brought them to where they are. Is that a path that I want to take? And I've tried to mirror a lot of those same strategies as other people. And then just continue to lean on connections for career growth as well. So trying to pick up mentorship over the way, whether formal or informal, and just focus a lot on trying to hone in on my craft and learn and trust in the process that, with the connections, with doing the work and the effort, that, we'll land in a good spot. And so that's how, I've landed in compensation today.
Great. Thank you. So on the topic of career planning and preparation, right? You've all had some different journeys getting to where you are. And so the question is, when it comes to setting a strong foundation for career advancement, what strategies or frameworks have you seen work well for creating a clear and intentional path? Who would like to start? Laura?
I like this question, and I was just sharing it with somebody as we were talking over lunch. And so I think that there's a couple of ways. I think that investment that I was speaking about is finding a mentor and having somebody that can be a soundboard and an advocate or supporter of you to bounce the ideas off of. That's may or may not know you in your professional work that you do every day. It can be somebody outside of your organization, your team. It doesn't even have to be within your company. But they're there to offer that advice. What I think is the next step, though, is you need to find a sponsor, somebody that's that advocate and that voice for you, that's going to speak about you and the capabilities and the success that you'll bring when you're not there. And I think that is such a key piece. And you can do that in tangent. And sometimes the mentor and the sponsor are not the same person. Usually they're not. And so I think that those things, as you're looking at your career path and your development, is finding out who that person who can sponsor and be that voice for you and carry for you is probably my biggest thing that I think is a differentiating piece.
And I love that, because we all talk about mentorship and networking, but we forget that we actually need someone that is operating for us on our behalf, our sponsors. Would you like to add?
Yeah, I mean, and to add to that, I would also mention that having multiple sponsors, like increasing your surface area for this as much as possible, will benefit you. A lot of times people think about, like, oh, my manager, didn't do X, Y, or Z, and the reality is the manager is one part of the equation. There's going to be mentors. There's other, it could be peers. It could be other people in the organization. The more of those people you have in your corner, the better it's going to be for you career-wise, because you never know when they can show up and help be that advocate for you in a crucial moment. The other thing I'd mention is having a structured process to think about going through your career at the right level of specificity can also help a lot. And what I mean by that, there's a book that actually outlines a lot of this. I'd recommend to really anybody who's thinking about career journeys at any stage. It's called What Color is Your Parachute? You don't have to use that exact model, but it has a lot of good frameworks in there to think about what's important for you. And this is beyond just the exact nature of the job itself, although that is important and it is covered there. But thinking about your life, right? What do you want to get out of your life? How does any particular job or career opportunity map against that? It'll give you some tools to be able to evaluate different options and break down the complexity of what it means to be in a particular job or a particular field. So I would recommend doing that as well.
So, as each of you have gone through your journeys and also being the professionals, let's dig into that a little bit more. Ella, would you like to talk a little bit more about the process you can go through and some steps you can specifically take when you're thinking about how to prepare for promotions or positioning yourself for a new opportunity?
Sure. So, once you decide that this is the path that I'm going to go, and I think that takes years for some people. Some people like start off, their job loving it and they know that like, okay, I'm going to stay. Some people, they kind of like experiment, right? Different jobs. But once you get to the point where you know that this is the field that you're going to be growing and you want to get to whatever role that you are anchoring on, think about, the different levels, right, to get there and how to level up. So, you should know what your skills are, right, and your experience, and what does it take to get to the next level. And you can do this with, by discussing with your managers. Let them know. Like, I think that's the first step. Like, you let your manager know that you are very serious about your career growth in the field. Your manager is somebody who went through a very similar journey to be where they are, right, leading a team and leading you, and ask them, what skills that do I have to, get to get to the next, to level up, basically. And they can hopefully show you, the areas that you can improve. If like you have to take courses or certifications to get there, like do that. So try to close the gaps that will set you up for success for the next level. And also, Laura mentioned networking too. Networking is hugely important because it will open up opportunities for you to be on projects that are like cross-functional, right? So you're not just staying in your own little team and in your own little space. It will elevate your visibility by working with different teams, and that can, give you an opportunity to show your leadership, right? And showing that leadership is what will differentiate you from other people to be, set up for promotions. So, those are a couple of like very practical things that I think that you can, tackle on first.
Great. Does anybody else want to add?
I well, actually was thinking as you're talking, somebody just starting out, that's not gonna be your last job. And I think that's a reality. And I think what I would advise or recommend is be a sponge. Absorb as much as you can. Learn and understand what you like and what you dislike. You may have to do parts of a job that you dislike for a period of time. You might find that you like it later in life. You might recall that later. But when you're first starting out, I think that it's just recognize it's not your last job, and recognize that it's okay to say that this isn't my cup of tea. But then you'll know, and you'll be able to continue to grow it. And it can go in many different areas and facets. And so it's still experience. It's still a skill set to learn, even if it's not your favorite. But then you'll also know what you really truly like, and it might draw you to another path or a lane that you weren't really starting out to.
You want to add, Lucas?
Yeah, thank you. So I would plus one to everything. The other way that I like to think about and frame my career development and career development in general is really like every experience that you have had, that you will have, is an opportunity for you to gain a new skill. Whether that is directly applicable to what you're doing, if it's a software that you're learning. But there's also the soft skills. If you did some door-to-door sales when you're in high school, like you're learning to be a really good communicator. So there are things like that where every experience is an opportunity for you to hone in on something, and everything will just continue to stack. As Laura is saying, like early in your career, that may or may not be the job that you stick to forever. But you're going to learn skills and have the opportunity to practice and hone in on those. And they're going to help you in whatever you do. And so just don't forget about that. Even jobs that you had in high school, you had in college, like these are all experiences and skills that you continue to progress on and you can leverage in whatever your future career looks like.
And it's okay not to know. I talk to a lot of folks in our community that come in through our Career Catalyst program, and they actually don't know what they want to do. They're very technical, or they have the math background, or they think data science is cool, or they want to jump into the AI buzz, but they just don't know what aspect they want to jump into. And they're nervous and scared. And it's okay, because as proof by this group, none of us actually started and are currently where we thought we'd be at this point.
Well, and maybe to add to that, I think then if to occupy the perspective of someone in that situation, one of the goals for your career at that point might be to learn, right? So, and approach, as Lucas was saying, approach the jobs or the opportunities you have with that in mind, prioritize that for different opportunities you might have available to you, and that sort of thing. That's how you leverage that framework, that sort of structured framework to approach opportunities if you're in that situation.
So that was a great ad. Let's expand on that a little bit more, right? So what can you think about? What signals may come your way as you are navigating your career, right? To make sure you're going down a path that is commensurate with your skill set. And then part 2 of that is, if you're going down that path, how do you know it's the right time to approach your manager or another leader to make a move and try to have a conversation about being promoted or move into a different role? Who wants to take that first?
Sure. So I'll start maybe framing it the opposite way. Generally, you'll know if something is not going right. You will get those signals. But the difficult part about that is a lot of times when things are going right, you aren't getting the direct signal. And that's where it's really hard. And you might have that self-doubt that you're not getting the affirmation, you're not getting the confirmation that what you're doing is superb, but it doesn't mean it's not. All managers are human, right? Like they have things going on in their life. They may talk about you in a different room, like, yes, they're doing amazing work, but not everyone is great at sharing that. And so, it really comes back to this idea of like advocating for yourself, being open to asking the questions out loud, sharing, what your goals are, what your interests are, and having those conversations, which for some people can be really difficult to put yourself out there because it means that there could be rejection that comes back. And so part of it is like being okay with that and using this as an opportunity to learn. If you're getting that signal that from your manager that says you're doing great in 9 out of 10 areas, here's this one thing that in order for you to get that promotion, you really need to hone in on this. You really need to be working on this or level up, whether it's those like hard skills or those soft skills, because both are important.
Ella?
Yeah, very good points. And another thing that I wanted to add is promotions don't just happen because you're doing great at your job, you're performing at the next level. There are other things that are required for promotions to happen. Is there a budget? Is there a solid business case? Is the team, like the team structure, will that change, because you're getting promoted to the next level? And if the team doesn't need to change the structure or doesn't have a strong case to do that, then like Lucas said, the answer could be no. And so, you can have that discussion with your manager and see what needs to happen, they have to get budget. And so like, even though it doesn't happen right away, you can kind of plant the seed, have the discussion. And then, if the answer is, well, I don't think our team will ever need like a director, and if your goal is to like make it a director, maybe you can go to a different team, then that's clarity, right? That kind of signals that, okay, maybe like, you staying on this team in that role is not the right answer to get you to where you want to be. And you can kind of explore other teams, other organizations.
I think oftentimes employees are afraid to ask what the process is in that and what the cycle is of when promotions occur, how they occur. You mentioned the budget piece, and that might not be a typical conversation that you have with your manager, but I think that it's a fair question to have. I also think that I would highly recommend be selfish. Nobody else is going to advocate for you like you are. You know what you do, you know how well you do it. And when you're doing your job really well, it rolls off of your tongue. And so create a brag book, figure out how you can document and keep everything that you've done success-wise, and the skill sets that you're learning, problems that you're solving that other people might not even know you're solving. Your manager might be able to talk about you, but there's only little snippets and times in which they can do it. And there's nothing wrong with you being that voice to be able to say, hey, look what I've done and look what I've accomplished.
So I love that. So one of the coaches that I had in my career on the later stages before moving up to VP level said, where's your smile file? Right? Where are the lists of items, your clients, your internal customers, your executives, people in your network that are telling you great things that you've accomplished and bragging about you to yourself, right? They're sending notes in, they're talking to you. Call it a smile file because it's hard to brag, right? Like I think it's a great thing and it's super important. Did you want to add anything? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, I would say also practice these interactions, right? I think that's something where a lot of times people are hesitant to do these because it feels awkward. It is awkward. The only thing that makes it less awkward is practicing it, right? So find someone safe. It could be a peer, it could be your sibling, your parent, whatever, to sort of role play these conversations. It's going to feel cringy, to maybe use a current term. But that's okay. I guarantee the 10th time you do it, it's going to be a lot better than the first time you did it.
I bet you Gen AI could help role play.
100%.
Absolutely. Awesome. So, we talked a little bit about preparing yourself and talking to your manager and figuring out what's important and figuring out the budgets, etc. So here's a question. So in large corporations, there's always a lot of people vying after the same positions, right? Everybody wants to make their way up, and there's only so many positions and so much budget. So how do you balance, and this I get asked a lot, readiness and ambition without looking like you're stepping on toes and coming across really pushy, right? A lot of women were concerned about that. So what do we do? All right. No. Do you want to go first?
It's a hard question, but yeah, like balancing is really like the, like what you have to focus, right? And obviously when you're going to talk about promotion, you're confident in your role, like in your capabilities, what you have done, in your success in the current level in your role, right? And so I would say, focus on that, but also be mindful of what other people are doing as well. It's not just you doing an amazing job. There could be like 5 others doing an amazing job too. So be in the know of what kind of, projects that they're working on that's really bringing like huge impact to the team, that could kind of put them in the priority lane than you. And talk to your manager just in a very clear way that I want to get promoted, not because I want to get promoted, but I really feel like I can bring a lot of value at the next level, and bring a lot more impact to this team. So I would position it that way and have a conversation in that angle, and also just be ready for like no. And if you're okay with waiting a few years, then great. If not, then you can find something else that could get you to where you want to be. But I think what's important is that don't feel like just because you are doing an amazing job in your role, like don't come off as entitled. Because I know that there are some people who make the mistake because they're so good at what they're doing that like, oh, I'm already operating at the next level, which is not really always the case. And especially when you want to get to like the director level where you have to like lead a team, then the soft skills are very, very important. I think that breakthrough happens from like going from IC to management track. And at that level, like, yes, you have to be absolutely great at what you do, but you also have like the soft skills, people skills are very, very important. Are you able to train other people? Like get all these like, things that's in your head. Can you get it out? And can you actually like train up others so you can delegate? Because that's a very, very different skill than, an awesome IC has. And so showing that as well is important.
And for our international team, just to make sure IC individual contributor. Okay, just throwing that out there. Laura, I know you have some to add.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the last part of your question where, feeling like you're stepping on other people's toes. The question that I would ask is well, why not me? Why can't it be me? And I think that's where that confidence and that selfishness needs to come in, because only you can advocate for yourself. And then there's a diplomacy way and tactful way of being able to have that conversation, which you were just touching on, Ella. And so it doesn't have to be aggressive. And it's when you're coming through and you're sharing all of your accomplishments and all of your capabilities, that's going to be the person making the decision is what you're providing at their fingertips. So at the end of the day, it's their decision. So you need to give it your all. And even if you're going up against your friend, you both have amazing qualities, but at the end of the day, you want to give it everything you've got and just don't give up on yourself and say, why not me? It can be me. It should be me.
So we're talking about promotions, but does this same feedback apply to asking for a raise, or is it different? Right? Because we're talking about career path and advancement and promotions.
I think in part, yes. So a big +1 to advocating for yourself. The other part of it that I would add on, and then I'll answer the pay question, is you also don't know what the other people on your team necessarily want or what they're looking for, right? Like they may be a great performer in their job, but maybe they don't want the promotion. Maybe they're looking to start a family and they actually want to scale back, or maybe they're looking to move, or maybe they're planning to move to a different company, right? So don't ever assume that just because someone else is really good, like you aren't worthy for that promotion. So on the pay question, I do think that there are a lot of similarities here. The point that I would add is with the pay piece of it, a lot of times you have a little bit more control at knowing the situation. Generally, you kind of get a sense for what the general pay is for your job. But I would also then ask, as a compensation professional, for you to make sure that you're doing some of that research, right? And ask yourself, like, why do I think I deserve this pay raise? Is it because I'm doing a great job? Is it because I feel like I'm underpaid? Was I brought in too low? Is it because I know one person who got this job offer that's a lot higher? And come prepared with some of that data to back that conversation, right? Because the worst thing that you can do is you go to your boss and say, I want a pay raise. And they say, well, why? You say, because I think I deserve it. Well, everyone thinks that they deserve more money. That's the little insider secret there from the compensation professional. But actually having some rationale, like why? Is your scope getting bigger? Is your performance like off the charts? So coming into that conversation prepared, I think is really key in order to having a really productive conversation around getting a pay raise or a promotion.
And maybe to add to that, I'm going to be on a theme of one of the themes I'll spend some time on is sales and sort of sales tactics. I'm not a salesperson. Started my career very skeptical of anything that had any of that flavor to it. And they can be incredibly beneficial. And in this particular circumstance, why I bring that up is because there's a salesperson at my current company who talked about this, about how when he has a customer that he's interacting with, there's a ton more that they can do together if there's options on the table, right? So the more options you can bring to the table to have those conversations with your managers or other stakeholders, the better off that's likely to be, right? If you just come and say, hey, I'd like a pay increase, not to say that's a bad thing to do, but come at least curious and maybe with some other different options. Maybe it's not a promotion, but maybe it's a different type of work that you can do or other things that can help give people different ways to put a deal together.
And just to add to that, with promotion, your pay will increase, right? So that's like a no-brainer. But I think also a good opportunity that a lot of people miss is when they are given a bigger scope and responsibility. You know, especially women, we don't really ask like, oh, is this going to increase my pay? Because it can get a little bit awkward, but don't be shy about it. Like there's no harm in asking, because that's a very valid question. You're taking on more responsibility. And so you can, talk to your manager. It's just going to like, I'm very happy to take on more, and, I can do it, but will this get reflected in my pay? And even if the answer right away is like, oh, like probably not right now, but that will probably trigger something in their head to think about your pay, like take a look at your pay and then, make some adjustment that way. So
I would also consider, when you're doing your research, if it's not just about compensation, are there other things that you're willing to take on as a form of compensation? Maybe it's a spot bonus and it's not a future, increase in salary. It could be if your company offers stock options, or if it's maybe, and I like that one only because I think that shows a commitment that you're committed to the company long term, as well as they might not be able to afford it at that point because of a budgetary reason. So those are things that you can put out on the table. It could be maybe you want to have flexibility to work from home, and that's more important than a salary or compensation increase. And again, the worst answer that they're going to be able to say is no. But you need to come prepared and have what's important to you. And that might change over time throughout your career as well, because you might be starting a family, or you may be getting ready to retire, or you are jumping to a brand new organization. And so there's going to be a learning curve. And so all of those things factor into those things. And so I figure out what would make you still happy if it just wasn't a bottom line dollar amount.
I think that's great feedback. Tristan, I think this is a nice handoff. I think we should talk more about overall compensation and what the elements are, so that we can make sure that everybody's considering the full picture.
Yeah, great point. And this is part of, when it comes to the structured evaluation of different opportunities, I would definitely recommend having this in here. So we could spend a lot of time talking about this, but I'll organize it into maybe a few different buckets. One is the direct compensation, which would be things like, these are things you can put a dollar value around relatively easily. Salaries, but also things like bonuses, stock, as Laura alluded to, are going to be the usual main elements there. There's also kind of what would be called like in-kind benefits, right? So things like health insurance, other types of support. That's a big one, in particular in the United States, but there's other similar programs that exist across the world. Retirement provisions, again, especially for folks earlier in your careers, it might be like, oh, retirement, retirement, that's decades away. Compound interest is a thing, so make sure to invest in that earlier in your career as well. And then last but not least, there's all the other kind of atmospheric elements of a job, right, which include things like what you're learning, but also, hey, do you like your colleagues? Do you have a good manager? Other things like that will, they play a big role, as anyone who's had a job can no doubt attest to. So those would be the main different buckets. And then within those, obviously, there's decision-making that you can make around which of those things may be more important to you at a particular point in time.
Did you want to add, Lucas?
Yeah, I think those are a lot of the great points. And then, there are also sometimes creative ways that companies will look to incentivize you to come work for them. Maybe you can bring a pet into the office. Sometimes they may offer a flexible spending account or a health spending account. So these are other different benefits that you can ask for that actually have a long-term monetary value to them, though you don't see it in your paycheck. You don't see it in your bank account. They are important things to look for and ask for. And then, depending on the size of the organization, generally the bigger the organization and the more cash that they have, the more flexibility they can have. So as Laura alluded to, maybe they can give you just this one-time bonus, because maybe you're saying, hey, I really want this pay raise because I have this big European vacation I want to go take and I need some extra dollars to get there. Maybe a bonus can help solve that problem. But there's also things that they could do to get creative and that you could ask for. You want to take that month off, but you only have 2 weeks of PTO left. You could say, hey, can I take an extra 2 weeks without charging that time? And maybe they'll be open to that. And again, like it's an unseen monetary value that you may be able to leverage. So, as Tristan was alluding to, like you can get creative in putting these options together for the deal.
What's been the most strange creative ask that you've encountered or heard?
There's been a number of requests, paying for college tuition for kids, paying for a trip to Disney, buying a car, things like that. Not saying we've done these things, but it again, it comes back to, you actually kind of you respect the people who are advocating for themselves and they're trying to get creative. A company like Google, there's a lot of cash sitting around, so they know that there's a lot of flexibility and they try to take advantage of that, which is actually sometimes beneficial. Instead of them just saying, hey, I want a $10,000 raise, like, what are you really trying to get out of this?
Thanks, guys. I think we might have a couple questions. Is that true? No? Okay. Okay. So we'll take the questions that were submitted, and we will try to respond to those. Did you have a question for us? No, that's okay. You said you don't. She doesn't have. We don't have them handy, so I'll let you ask a question.
Hi, thank you for your time. First of all, my question is about neurodivergence. So some of the top performers on teams that I've led, but also the most undercompensated, have been neurodivergent, and a lot of the tactics that you've been talking about kind of lend themselves well to neurotypical people. Things like finding a sponsor or a mentor. We say hydrating your BATNA, a best alternative to negotiated solution, interviewing a lot. That can drain neurodivergent people a lot faster than neurotypical people, especially in the data science world. This is pretty common. I was wondering if you have any, resources, thoughts, things that have worked better for neurodivergent folks in the tech world that might be useful.
That's a good one. Who would like to take that?
What I can share for some of my team and my experience is that we've had to go back and relook at job titles and literally arm wrestle with HR and the compensation team, because it's not a one size fits all. And when we want the top talent, we have to be willing to pay for the top talent. And when we have these grand ideas and wanting to be able to deliver, we're looking for the best. And so, for me, it's sometimes reevaluating the actual job title and the description of what they're doing and what the individual is contributing, and how do we separate that from a job family or other titles that the rest of the company may be using, and becoming more of a niche. And in my world, like if we're in finance versus a more technical background, it's the same job, but I just might be back office. And so again, it's that sponsor that's going to be there to advocate, and it might be the leader of that particular organization to recognize that. I think that we can showcase the differences of what those individuals have done.
Thank you. Okay, so I have one last question for each of you to chime in on, and then we're going to wrap up the session. If there's one piece of advice that you'd give someone preparing for a career or compensation conversation, whether they're just starting out and interviewing for the first job, asking for a raise, or stepping into leadership, what might that one piece of advice be? All right, Lucas.
Yeah, I think one thing that I found that's been really helpful is being more patient than I'm comfortable being. I've spent a lot of time in my career trying to rush to that next title, that next job, that next promotion. And we're talking about promotions, and you should advocate for yourself, but also make sure that you're ready, make sure you've done your homework, make sure you've practiced these conversations. And you probably want to be more patient than you're comfortable being. Take a little bit of that extra time, whether that's a few months to make sure you really get this skill on the job honed in, or an extra day to do 5 more practice sessions in the mirror of this conversation. Because the more crisp you can make this and the more practiced you are, the more likely you're going to have a good outcome.
Anybody else want to add?
I would say that don't let fear hold you back, because all like a lot of things that we talked about today, those are very awkward things, uncomfortable, scary things to talk about, right? Like bring up to your manager about promotions, or finding a new job, or these are all very sometimes scary stuff, and it's almost easy to just sit in your comfort zone. But if you really have a goal that you want to reach, don't let fear hold you back, and just face it and dive to the deep end with faith, knowing that it'll work out, and give your best. Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I mean, for me, I would say investing in some of these, like, again, I hesitate to apply this label to it, but the kind of sales techniques. And it's not about everyone becoming a salesperson, right? It's about leveraging a little bit, like add a dash of that into the great background that you've already built. A lot of folks in this room and elsewhere are going to be very quantitatively focused. That's great. This is not about detracting from that. It's about adding to it. And if you sprinkle a little bit of that in with the other strengths that you have, it's going to supercharge your ability to perform and be successful.
Awesome. So this is a tough topic to tackle in 45 minutes. So I want to encourage you all that are part of WIDS Worldwide and the Puget Sound team to make sure you're joining in on the WIDS community platform, and you're joining in on Career Catalyst, and you'll be able to follow up with any of the panelists, both in those platforms and offline. And with that, I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you so much.